Once again, this is the Cult of Honesty, and we are going for pushing the envelope tonight. And the subject is, I think, theodicy, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to deal with both sides of the coin, have a lot of fun. We're running late. I'm talking quick, but it was fired up before we actually started the show, and so hopefully we can get back into the fire.
We made them be silent because they were spilling their brilliance off the air.
That's true. They were spilling much more than their brilliance, but we're going to continue, and hopefully we can have a good time at this. And so, Joey, why don't you introduce the subject tonight more thoroughly?
Okay. I'm going to pronounce the word theodicy. I don't know which one is correct, but I agree with Greg. When you say theodicy, some people think you're talking about some ancient Roman or Greek tale. So we are talking about theodicy specifically. Now, if I understand, and what we were talking about last week as well, we're talking about, just to expand here, the conundrum that exists between a God who is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-present, and the reality that we have on earth here, that we have a lot of tragedy, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and how can those things coexist? Last week, we explored that on a level of looking at it from the common English, the common viewpoint of our Western culture, how we view God, who He is, etc. And then Dr. Jones tried to derail the whole conversation by introducing he was trying to introduce literacy. I don't understand that. And then he was also trying to introduce looking at the English text from a literate point of view, and also looking at the original language and what is said there, and I just kind of wave that silliness out of the way, and we finished the conversation the way that we were having it. But I did promise him that this week we would kind of explore and I don't mean this condescendingly, but a more literate viewpoint of the English text, as well as exploring some of what the original texts say. Dr. Jones, I'm going to ask you to play a larger role in this conversation if we're going to do that, because as a linguist, we're going to have to lean to you in terms of what these texts say, whether they be true or not.
Since we're getting close to launch time, I think it's going to be best to stay with the agenda that we had last week first, because we did promise Bob and others who did not get a chance to have a chance to input to get back into that. And so let's get fired up there, and then we will attempt to create a better model, and I would like for everyone to even contemplate a much different model.
So we're going to begin with like we did last week, with the conventional viewpoint, and then we're going to allow a little bit of expansion this week. Okay, let's bring Hangouts up, bring them into the picture, and find out who we have with us today. So bring their volume up, please. Looks like we have, of course, Bob Graves, and then we have Brian Fields back with us. Hello, Brian.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
And who is the lady in the dark here?
That's Kat.
Okay. Hi, Kat.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good to meet you. I'm trying. I don't know how to get this lighting better where I live.
That's okay. But if you join us on a regular basis, we're going to have to get you to work hard on that, because you look like you're trying to protect your identity.
I know.
And we have Christian back with us. Hi, Christian. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on again. Looking forward to the discussion tonight.
Good to see you. Hi, Dennis. This is Dennis Scoose. We call him Scoosey, and he has gladly taken on that what we would call I believe that the technical term for that is a badass name. And then who it looks like we have Nelson Rose. Hi, Nelson.
I'm here. How you doing, guys?
Are you having a power failure where you are?
The power went. I'm hiding in my son's room because there's a bunch of my daughter's friends over, so I can't take my usual spot. The lighting in his room is very cavernous.
You look like you are in a post-apocalyptic basement.
Well, I'm in a post-apocalyptic kind of mind right now, given the week that I've had. So.
And then lastly, we have Daryl Furlow with us. Hi, Daryl.
Howdy.
Daryl is from our Texas studio. It's good to have you with us. Okay, let's begin this discussion. Bob, why don't you start us off, continuing from where we were last week, from a conventional viewpoint of God.
Because I wasn't part of last week's show, so I don't know exactly what you were saying. But they don't call me the unconventional pastor for nothing. I don't think I possess a conventional view of God. But when it comes to the problem of evil, I consider the problem to be really bogus. And actually, I consider it to be irresponsible. I don't think that mankind is so inept that he can't solve his own evil problems that he causes. And I think that there would be great problems if anybody were to interfere with that. And I really think the problem of evil has been created by people who were never parents and didn't realize that, you really have to allow your children to make a lot of their own mistakes. And we have no idea. I just see so many different problems with the problem that it doesn't strike me as being a problem that even really requires an answer. I suppose it's a problem that exists because of some of the conventional ways that people look at God. And particularly the way they want to think of God as enmeshed in our lives in a way that I don't think he is. So, I could take up too much time talking about that, but I can say this: I do believe in God. I do believe in a personal God. I do believe in a God of love. But I don't believe that any of the difficulties or evils that we are suffering from here are any of his responsibility. And I think that it's absolutely very much our responsibility. And I could turn it around for people who actually believe there is no God to say that, to whatever degree you are aware of evil, do you have to be all powerful, or do you just have to have some power? Maybe people don't exist. I can turn this problem around, the problem of evil, about considering the goodness of mankind and whether or not we're serious about dealing with it. So I just see it as a problem that gets carried away because it's so abstract, but it's not really realistic or in keeping with real human need to solve this kind of problem.
Yeah, you're right, Bob. I would never refer to my children as evil. However, I might call them wicked little snots from time to time. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, sure.
My kids are here. They're throwing things at me now. Brian, why don't you jump in on this? It looks like you're chewing on your title bar.
All right, so I think that it's important that we consider our terms here. Now, when you talk about God, obviously conventionally people think of God as all-powerful, all-knowing, etc. We talked about that last week. I'm kind of curious. The parent aspect of God, the idea that God is a creator parent that cares for his children, seems to be a little bit. It doesn't quite jive with the idea. How can you relate an all-powerful creator of the universe as a parent to a human parent, which obviously has a limited scope, limited power, limited capabilities? A human parent understands, that children make mistakes. But if you look at the Bible, for example, the Bible is very big on eternal punishment for finite mistakes. For example, if you start with the garden and Adam and Eve, and Eve goes and eats or gives the fruit to Adam to eat, and then all of a sudden mankind, not just Adam and Eve, but Adam and Eve's descendants, are then punished for the behavior of Adam and Eve. But this isn't a theme limited to just Adam and Eve either. It's later in the Bible where there's talk of punishing descendants for the crimes of the parent. We could talk about Cain, or also I'm not a biblical scholar, but I know there are other references in the Bible to this as well. It's not a limited scope thing. So,
hold on just a moment, Brian. Can we find out where?
I think it's coming from Christian. Christian's microphone. Are there kids?
Looks like there is eternal suffering and pain coming from Christian's feed.
Yeah.
Can we mute him for as long as that's happening?
That sounded like some real Old Testament.
Some weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Well, to just finish what I was saying, that if you're going to define God as something other than what the Bible presents, more power to you. I mean, I still think that you're left with, you have to provide evidence for that God, but that's my point of view. But if you're going to talk about a biblical God and the question of evil, I mean, you're left with what the Bible says about God, and I'm sure others in here can challenge me on notions of that, but I find a hard, looking at the lessons in the Bible, even in an allegorical sense, I find a hard time reconciling the idea of the godly parent that is interested in directing a child in the proper way while still allowing a free will with what you read in the Bible.
Very good. Yeah, that Adam really gets my goat. It's a grudge that I'm afraid I can't let go of. Anyways, so who is it? Let's just work from my left to right. Let's show the Hangouts again, please, so that I can see that, please. Let's go to Kat. Kat, what do you have to contribute here?
Okay. I'm kind of confused. First off, let me get the topic straight. We are defining God. If a God existed,
okay, so here's
the
question. Let me just present the question to you as simply as I can. We have a God who is all powerful. He is all knowing, and he is all present. That is the conventional viewpoint of God across most religions, most denominations. And then you have the dilemma of the existence of evil in the world, suffering, pain, etc. When one asks the question, where does this come from, and one considers the dilemma that most people believe that all things come from God, the question would be, how can these two notions exist at once, that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-present, and yet evil and suffering exists in the world of human beings?
It can't. It's impossible. There's absolutely no logic to that. And if there is an all-powerful God, and he allows the atrocities to continue, and unfairness. I mean, there is definitely nothing as karma. I mean, people are doing atrocities and horrible, horrible things to others, and they completely get away with it. You know.
Do you believe in an all-powerful, all?
Oh no, I'm an atheist.
You're an atheist. Okay, that helps to know, because below your name it says "rock beyond belief," and I had to stop for a minute to understand what that meant. I can explain that to you after. But yeah, there is absolutely no sense to any of that. I mean, if there was an all-powerful God, and he allowed everything to happen that happens, then he is an asshole. And that's all that there is to it. I mean, I'm sorry, but that is how I feel. Well, I respect your opinion, and largely
it's not somebody I would want to hang out with. You know, I definitely would not hang out.
Maybe a game of football. Some Parcheesi. No, okay, all right.
He's not somebody I would want in my circle of my life, and
you wouldn't even put him in your Google Hangout circle.
Maybe so I could tell him he's a dick.
All right, Christian.
No, seriously. I mean, that's a completely different scenario. I'm talking about within my life, and have somebody around me or around the people that I like, or just somebody that I would want to go have a beer with, go to a movie with, go have dinner with. He's not somebody that I would respect
I can appreciate that.
And I could have a Google Hangout with him, but that doesn't mean I'm going to respect him as a person, or definitely not a deity if he was all that, and hurts allows children to be hurt the way that they are.
Okay, well I'll let him know.
Okay.
Christian, jump in here. Tell me what you got to say. Christian, go ahead. What do you think about all this? Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I would say that the model that people usually think of in conventional Christianity of an all-powerful God, an omnipotent God, with the idea of evil being a property of the universe, seems to be inconsistent. But if we think about God actually not being all-powerful as we generally think of God, that perhaps he is limited by the attributes of his beingness, the way he brings about beings into creation. There's a certain risk that even God takes himself about bringing beings into creation. And so one of the main risks that's predominant we see is evil. But with the idea that in the end, the consummation, everything will be reconciled, it doesn't sound all that bad. There are many things that seem unfair to us in this realm right here in the now, and I realize I complain a lot myself in my daily life, and sometimes I just have to remind myself, well, this is temporary, the thing is, if you have the view that everything will be reconciled by God, and we are active in that participation of reconciling ourselves, then, there's some sort of engagement. I mean, an all-powerful God, an omnipotent God, I don't see why an omnipotent God would need any worship from any of his subjects. There's no need. But a God that's a doesn't,
powerful statement.
That doesn't have all the power, doesn't have all the power, well, that means that there could be some sort of relationship going on between God and the creation, the created beings. But if he's infinitely powerful and infinitely knowing, then there really can't be any sort of meaningful relationship with the creatures that are created, the beings. And as Bob was saying before earlier, that evil is inbuilt as a means of somehow enabling us to learn, to grow. If there weren't any suffering whatsoever, there wouldn't, pretty much our lives would be very static, very neutral. And so I think with the idea that everything will be reconciled, we have, a lot of suffering that we go through, but it's for us to understand and to grow in relationship with each other as human beings here on earth and with God as well. But I do not share the idea what Brian said earlier about eternal punishment. Like I've said before, that's not in the Bible. If you read the Greek and the Hebrew, that's not existent as far as I understand from the linguistic point of view.
Yeah. I agree with you, Christian, but that's a large discussion on its own. When I used to look at the dilemma of theodicy, or I used to, this is a comment that I used to make. I am a theist who is a fan of atheists. I hear their questions and their objections, etc. And we here at the New Covenant Group have found that just listening to atheists has helped us to grow so much. And so I really have no issues with somebody who has chosen not to believe in God, and most of us here at the New Covenant Group are that way. But I do, and what I used to say when this dilemma was presented to me was that most people who talk about these things, they voice two different objections. Number one, that God allows all this pain and suffering to exist in the world, and number two, that these ideas of destiny and fate and the power of God and His ability to know the future and to know everything limits our free will. And my comment has been that you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want free will, and you feel that it's just for God to give you free will, then you must accept that there will be pain and suffering in this world because you are an imperfect being. And we as human beings make mistakes. And to blame those mistakes on put your hand down, Brian. I see you. Let me finish. To object to a world of pain and suffering when you have asked God to give you free will is and then to blame the pain and suffering on God is irresponsible, because the human beings that have been given that free will are the ones who have caused the pain and suffering, and not God. And that's the comment that I used to make, and I know it's a very provocative one. And Brian, we'll come back to you, and you can trash me. But for now, let's go to Nelson. One thing.
I'm making notes, Kat. Maybe you might want to do
just
this.
make some notes.
I just want to say that has nothing to do with why I'm an atheist. I just want to put that out there.
Okay,
That's
very
it.
good, very good. Nelson, jump in.
Right.
Jump in before these atheists clobber us. Jump in, quick.
I just want to let that be known.
I don't know. I think you may have skipped Dennis.
Oh, did I? I'm very sorry. Dennis, you're right, absolutely. He's sitting back there.
That's going to happen. Personally, my own few thoughts I think about when it comes to God. I think we created such a God in Christianity today about some being that's really high, all-powerful, the master of it all. But I think that's above itself. I think because humanity is placed very low and there's such being is very high, and we are the low one. And I think it's better thought to be some eagleness in it. And yes, with free will, of course, there comes responsibility, and yes, we make mistakes. But on the other hand, I think nobody wants to be a robot, but only does God good. I mean, life will be pretty boring, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with you. Nelson?
Well, it's been an interesting week because I've actually discussed a lot of this stuff on Facebook, but in a recent blog post where I kind of came out, quote unquote, as a pantheist rather than a traditional theist or an atheist. And the reason that is because of exactly this particular topic. It's for me, it's less of a big guy in the sky who's got control, who clearly doesn't have control if that's really what he's supposed to be, and more of a instead of the reference of God as a noun, more of the reference of God as a verb, and maybe even getting away from the term God itself, and thinking about whatever. Within humanity, we have emotions, we have love, we have compassion, we have, and when you take these things, that mystical Judaism has what's called the Ten Sephra, where you've got judgment, you've got righteousness, you've got compassion, you've got mercy, you've got nothing. Absolutely nothing is the top part of the whole tree. And I think when you combine all of those things into one, you have whatever this divine essence is, this perfection. And and I don't consider that as a being, that's so distant. I consider that as something that is actually embedded within everybody and everything. So while some theists would like to say, so you're saying that everything is God? Okay, so a tree's God? No, God's within the tree. God's within me. God's within you. Everything. And this is the true omnipresence that triple delta is talking about. And then the omnipotence, of course, that's where you have the laws of nature that come into place. That's how divinity is omnipotent. Nature itself, the laws of nature, the unexplainable things that happen. So when it comes to this Father, Creator, deity, this protector, that kind of gets explained away when a tornado destroys an elementary school filled with children. You can't blame that on a sinful, evil individual with a gun. Okay, you blame that on nature. Okay, but when nature is something that we're all connected to, and when every element of what that is, is a collective whole, then it becomes more of, instead of it being a good and evil thing, it becomes an ebb and flow, a positive and negative. That's just the chaos versus the order. And that's the way, the whole thing kind of, I know it's almost nonsensical, but at the same time, it makes better sense than somebody being in control sitting up in the clouds, which is complete nonsense.
Nelson, I don't mean to.
That's kind of where I'm at.
I'm sorry to cut you off. You may have been finished anyway, but I want to make a full round, and then what I want to do, Dr. Jones, is I want to let Daryl jump in, and then I want to have a moment where we have some free conversation, because I know that Brian is chomping at the bit, and probably Kat as well.
Yeah, there's much to be stated concerning this subject. I don't think that we need to move on yet. Let's continue.
Daryl, we haven't heard from you yet. Why don't you throw your 2 cents in?
Well, let me identify myself, first of all, as a theist, yet a theist who is in transition. And I think anyone who would refer to themselves as a theist and is not in transition has problems. For anyone to say, okay, I know God, I know exactly how he is, there is a God, he's just like this. I would figure that person doesn't know what they're talking about. But a lot of the ideas that I had about God in the past, and I mean a lot, have gone out the window. And I have something that I'm much more satisfied with these days concerning what I conceive God to be, who I conceive him to be. And I want to comment on something that Kat said earlier. While I am a theist, I'm a human being. And I've been called an asshole. I've been called worse. And
I didn't call those you. I wasn't talking about. I was talking about if God was all powerful.
No, he wasn't saying that.
I didn't say anything. I did not call.
No.
I was not talking about people.
It's okay, Kat. Daryl is an asshole.
He knows it.
He's fine.
I know you didn't call me one.
Yeah, but you weren't calling him. Go ahead, Daryl.
I'm just using that to make a point. The point being, I kind of view God that way these days. As a theist of the past, and like I said, with changing views, in the past, I would have thought for someone to do that, oh my goodness, for sure they're going to end up in hell. And now I don't even believe in the eternal punishment idea or anything called hell. At least in that literal sense that most Christians, theists, see hell. But when I hear a comment like that, to me, I consider that it's okay. It's just like if somebody calls me an asshole, maybe I am one in some regards, especially in their eyes. And I don't think that God would have a problem with that at all, that he's not struggling with any of us. But another thing, or to me, in listening to the conversation, this is one of the things that really stands out to me. I'm enjoying looking at a bunch of faces. I see Bob, I see Brian, I see Kat, I see Christian and Dennis, Nelson. I don't know if I've met Nelson before. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
I can't see Joey, but I see a caricature that does a real good job. But, I see human beings, and I'm a fellow human being. And I love what Bob says about, our responsibility as human beings. Because when I think of suffering, when I think of children in pain or anything such as this, it's not so much what should God be doing or what is he not doing, but the question is more, what am I doing? Is there something in me that needs to respond to that? And, where is my heart, if you will, in the matters of humanity? Do I care? And if I do, if I find that in me and I'm a human being, then shouldn't I expect to find it in other human beings? And can we come together, and whether we claim there is a God or claim there's not a God, or whether there is or whether there is not, can we take such an interest in humanity that we would not want to see anyone suffering, whether they're suffering in the mind that would cause them to go out and kill innocent people, or whether they're suffering as an innocent person being, And so these are the questions that really concern me. And let me end this with just kind of a idea of what I consider deity to be, or God, if you will. And I'm going to see a being who is content to just push us forward and say, okay, here's some problems. See what you can do with them. And I'm behind you. And by the way, in the long run, everybody's going to come out all right. Now, that may be a little bit idealistic there, but, I've seen people go through horrendous suffering and come out with a wonderful attitude, and I've seen people who have everything on a silver platter and have horrible attitudes. So it all depends on, how we respond to, what we have before us. And we have much to draw from, whether it be from the aspect of love or the aspect of hate. Where are we going to go with it?
Great comment.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Now, let me hang on just a minute before we continue. And I appreciate everybody being patient. But now, what I want to ask my mixer in the back to do, the guy who's controlling. Sean, I think, who's controlling our Hangouts, is to unclick whoever you have clicked and let the audio control the mix. And we're going to spend just a few minutes. Is this okay, Dr. Jones? Spend just a few minutes having a free discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just open it up. Whoever wants to jump in, just try not to let it become too chaotic.
Okay.
And we're just going to go. All right, so go ahead, Kat.
Okay, the question I have for you is, when you were talking about that it is our responsibility to help other people. Do you feel that comes from God? Because when you were talking about it, that was the impression that I got, that you think that we have to have that God.
Divine order?
Yes.
Yeah. Who are you asking?
Well, it says Tina.
Yes, she's asking Tina.
Connection.
She's asking Tina. Go ahead.
That's
you were just talking about that you feel that it comes from that we need to help others. Well, which I agree with. And that we need to do something, which I agree with. I just don't agree that it takes having a God, or belief in a God, or that one exists for me to be able to care about others and to do
I'll answer your question like this, if it's okay.
However you want to answer it.
Okay. In my experience, and being a theist, I was taught and trained that atheists are bad. They're bad people. Stay away from them. Good advice. Now that I've gotten past that, in getting to know the atheists that I've gotten to know, I think there's more help in humanity there than there is in most religious people.
You're absolutely right.
Believe in a God. and I don't think that is the criteria. The criteria is, where's your heart? And if there's a God behind it, then hey, we're awfully confused, because most
we need
Christians,
to cut this man off right now. We need to cut him off.
I think I can. I'd like to speak to that to just a moment. I think that it's very true that atheists are far more responsive to many of these human empathetic questions. And I think that one of the reasons why they are is because I think Christians sit on their ass because they believe in a God who's supposed to be responsible for all this stuff, and they're not doing anything.
Right, and he's going to come and make everything better.
You're right, yeah, and so and yet I think history demonstrates to even theists, God seems to be kind of not very busy, and when are we going to realize?
Shockingly unbusy.
Evidently, and so I can't for the life of me figure out why, even though I am a theist, why do other theists think that somehow, because to tell you, I don't think it matters. I have no clue if God is omnipotent, all-knowing, and all-loving, all that, and I think it's irrelevant. we need to be proactive ourselves, and we've been sitting on our butts. And I really think that religion is the anchor that mankind is dragging along as it moves forward. And it's,
and the irony of that whole thing is that when you look at that, the apex of what Christianity is supposed to be, it's supposed to be centered around Jesus. Okay, and it's anything but what he talked about. Okay, it's anything but about loving your neighbor as yourself. It's anything but about what you do to the least of my brethren. It's anything but about surrounding yourself with people who maybe aren't the highest profile people in society. You lower yourself, and that's
the very definition of hypocrisy.
It is, and it's insanity, and that's what's turned a lot of people away from it, including myself, and had them start looking at other things. Where the atheists have just been like, look, you just do good things for the sake of doing good things.
Yeah, it's a good thing to do. Period. Yeah.
That's it.
Feed the starving because they're hungry.
Oh, there's a novel idea. But don't wave a Bible in their face while you're doing it. Just give them food.
Absolutely.
You guys ran out of steam.
I want to let
words.
Brian, you were going to make a comment a few minutes ago. Go ahead and make it.
You were gonna just tear into
You were taking
me,
notes.
and then you didn't.
You guys did this.
What happened?
Well, I was being patient, and I have a tendency when I know that I have a tendency when I start to. All right, okay. So I have a few notes that I took here. The first one. I noted, I think Bob said something about if a deity created mankind with free will, that there was a risk involved, and therefore some of the effect of because of that the deity must have necessarily not, kind of maybe either tuned down his omnipotence or isn't actually omnipotent.
That was Christian Luke who said that, yeah.
Might have been. Okay. Anyway, so I wanted to comment that I don't. I made a note. My first note was best of all possible worlds. When you observe the world around us, could you honestly say that the properties of this world is the best of all conceivable worlds that you could possibly come up with? And
hell no.
Right. So I mean, if all of us in our finite wisdom and our finite power could conceive of a world better than this one, I mean, I think that leads to the actual core of the problem with theodicy. What are we saying now? Theodicy. In that. If by observation you look around and you say, I could fix it if this were like this and this were like this, and we think about, I don't personally have a desire to go out and mass murder people. I'm going to lay that right out there. I really don't care to do it. That we're increasingly
you made
finding
Kat
out.
Smile when you mentioned mass murder.
Maybe she does. I don't.
No, I'm happy that you're not going to do that. I'm congratulating.
Awesome. All right. So
Good man.
glad we're all on the same page. But the thing is that we're frequently finding out that a lot of the evils that we notice in people are more a problem with wiring than actually, what one could identify as an intentional maliciousness. Some people are just really screwed up in either their wiring or their experiences or some combination thereof.
Or misperceptions. Many people doing evil think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, it boils down to wiring.
Right. So if you look at that, and this is the conclusion that we're more and more coming up to, the question then isn't, is this an issue for mankind where mankind is somehow falling short? But, hey, look, his wiring was screwed up. Why is his wiring screwed up? And why are so many people's wiring screwed up in a particular way that causes them to be malicious? And then you have to turn around and say,
GMO.
well, perhaps.
Or maybe because they're created in God's image.
Which knocks down the whole omnibenevolent thing right out of the park.
That was good.
Thank you for the setup.
Well, it was perfect. I'm thinking basketball here.
Okay, so that was one of my first thoughts. The next is somebody brought up understanding versus relationships. How we can understand God, or how we can't really. I mean, there was a question about God as someone we have a relationship with, and then somewhere else in that conversation was, but our concept of God is flawed. I forget exactly what he said, but if we can't understand God, we can't have a relationship with God. If we can't define God, or we don't even know what God is, I don't think it's reasonable to say that we can possibly have a relationship with a being that none of us really have any solid conception.
I agree with you to some extent, Brian, but I just want to make a distinction. We're speaking only from a very high-minded philosophical standpoint here, not necessarily that which is true. I agree with you that that is certainly possible to have a relationship with someone who is all-knowing, but I would question whether it's possible for someone who is all-knowing to have a meaningful, progressive relationship with me.
Okay. But I usually envision a relationship as something that is bidirectional.
Bidirectional, two ways.
Yeah. If you have a relationship with someone, I know that person knows me. That's relations. But I can understand somebody without somebody understanding me, but that's not relationship.
Right, and I agree with that. I thought you were saying that it was possible, and I would.
No.
Oh, okay.
My position is it's not.
Okay.
Do you have a personal relationship with your Savior thing?
Yeah, and Christian Luca was agreeing with you, I believe. I believe he was saying that if God is all-knowing, it is very questionable as to whether he could have a meaningful relationship with us.
Well, I'm just saying that if we don't even know what God is, or we can argue about the nature of, then we can't have a relationship. We can't have a relationship with anything that we don't understand.
But don't you think it's a bit oxymoronic to call it a personal relationship with something that's not even personal? I mean, that's what makes me crazy when I hear it all the time.
Yeah, I don't understand that personal relationship thing. Something that I think that Brian would probably even agree with is that even if we're going to say back off from the concept of omnipotence and all that, are we going to say that God is basically saying, well, sorry, it's all a bit overwhelming for me right now, and I'm just doing the best I can. I have a little patience.
Oh, I left the toilet running. Let me go over there.
Yes, excuse me.
I just flooded China.
But I would say that I do think that an atheistic approach, in a sense, is the best one. Is evil a problem in this world? Let's pretend there is no God. What are we doing about it, and why should God's existence make any difference?
Brian, pretend there is no God.
I'm such a stretch. But
how about let's take another stretch. Brian, pretend there is nobody else who believes in any gods. That everybody is an atheist, and then describe
paradise. But
see, but the irony of the whole thing is we can actually do something about everything. Where instead of spending money to blow people up, we can spend money to feed people. And we don't do that.
I agree, and there's certainly a lot of. I mean, the list. If I had to list out the issues I have with religion and all that stuff,
religion is the biggest obstacle to that. Religion is the biggest obstacle to all of that. It really is.
I only had one other comment, and then I will shut up for the rest of the show, or at least until somebody brings it up.
Don't do that.
I don't think he will. He's lying. Go ahead, Brian. With the
but that is what is the difference between pantheism and atheism? I understand. I know that I understand pantheism. I understand the concept. But if you define God as some force in the universe that is in everything and part of everything, and everything is part of God, and everything is part of the universe. Isn't at that point your definition of God and the universe being unity, them being the same thing?
Pragmatic.
That's the thing. That's where I think Dawkins called pantheism sexed up atheism. Whatever sexed up atheism is. I think what it is
60s love child. Think of the 60s and the hippies and everything is
I
love.
think there is a difference.
Yeah, pass the ball in the brownie.
I want to hear Nelson. I want to hear Nelson respond though.
Okay, go ahead, Nelson.
Well, for me, the difference is, and it's an ever subtle difference, is that, and it could be my misunderstanding of atheism in general, but to me, there is something that I believe ties everything together, and what that is, I don't know. And I don't think that as a finite being, I'm even capable of knowing. And so that I think is the difference, where I can't just discard it as saying, there's nothing. We're just here. There's no explanation to it. There's no reason for it. I think to go that far, to that extreme, that's just not something that I'm at least not ready at this point to make. But so I still believe in a spiritual aspect of things, to where I think that, that a perfection is something that is attainable should we all work towards it. But, that we all have a mutual and moral responsibility to each other to take care of not only ourselves, but of the planet and of everything else, so I think ultimately that's the difference. It's more of a spiritual aspect, to where I'm not willing to drop the spiritual side. I'm not willing to say that there isn't some kind of a connection between myself and my children, and myself and my recently departed grandmother. You know what I mean? So I think to that extent, that's what keeps me kind of somewhat theistic, although not in that traditional boxed in sense of some, white bearded man in the sky who.
You don't believe in Bob?
I don't believe in Bob. No, I don't believe in Bob. I just want to respond to two things then, because as far as atheism, I think it's good to have it. To have a definition of atheism, so that atheism is typically defined as a lack of belief in a god or gods. Period. However that works for what your perception is, that's the commonly held definition by atheists. And that doesn't mean necessarily someone who pretty much thinks there's no God, but doesn't know it. I know a lot of people call that agnosticism. That's actually atheism. Right. But it is actually atheism. I would call that atheism as well. Only it's
because
non-committed atheism.
You can be an agnostic atheist. You can be an agnostic atheist.
That's correct.
I'm an agnostic theist.
Because atheism is a statement of belief. Agnosticism refers more to epistemology.
I think atheism is a statement of not belief, and agnosticism is a statement of confusion.
Well, not knowledge. The difference between belief and knowledge. Atheism is about belief.
No, you can't.
Please.
I just had one other thing.
You're not permitted.
I told you couldn't shut up, Brian. I told you.
All right. I'll shut up.
Christian Lucas got something
the dialogue,
to say.
though, Brian.
Yeah. Christian's got something to say.
Oh, Lord. Go ahead, Christian.
Your mic is off, I think. Christian, your mic.
I need some more whiskey.
Don't we all? Christian, your mic is off, I think. Yeah.
All right. While he's figuring that out, let me say something here. Because, first of all, I want to recognize a couple of things. Number one, clearly, not all theists are the same. You can have a definition of theism, but you will have all sorts of specific deviations from that definition. And you can also have, likewise, a definition of atheism, but not all atheists are the same at all. And I found that by speaking with many of them. And so some atheists do believe, well, before I go on to my next comment, let me say that the definition of God also varies from person to person. Dr. Jones made a comment earlier, and this will possibly step us into the next part of this conversation, which we will not have time to even get deep into today. But earlier, Dr. Jones said to me, he said, if one person says it's raining and another person says it's not raining, are those two comments in contradiction? If I can just get a brief answer from one of you, are those two comments in contradiction?
Not necessarily.
No.
Right.
Not necessarily.
Because it depends on what?
It depends on perception.
Or it depends on a lot of things. Location, what it's meant by raining, whether we're being literal or metaphorical. There are so many things that it depends on. So right. Just finishing my comment here.
So raining on the parade doesn't necessarily mean that it's raining on the parade.
Exactly. So when it comes to how we are using the term God, that varies from person to person. Greg Bray and I talked about this subject on our show Clash Course, and we struggled very hard to come up with a abstract definition of God that could apply to how all people use that definition, and the best that we could come up with was a conscious and willful creator. He accepted that definition, and then I went on to demonstrate that our universe can be argued to be conscious and willful, and that is where I think that atheism can vary from person to person. Some atheists will argue that our universe has no life of its own, that it is not conscious, it is not willful, it is not intelligent. And some atheists will play with that idea and admit, possibly there is some intelligence or consciousness or will. And so
I'm of the previous type, just as an FYI.
Okay,
so
you and I could have a very interesting discussion about that, and that's where I think that there is possibly a line in the common understanding between atheism and pantheism. Is I think most pantheists would adhere to the latter philosophy.
Exactly.
Well, I understand that, and that's actually kind of I must admit that when I asked the question, I was wondering if that were the case, but I didn't want to make any presumptions.
Very good.
But I do want to say, and I just put it in the chat channel just in case I didn't get a chance to say it. Most atheists, the atheist community itself, is looking at the question of what is an atheist, because for the most part, a lot of atheists are just out there on their own, and so the community itself is looking at definitions in order to better communicate with the public what are we and what do we think. And more and more often, the definitions are resting on you had stated two types of atheist, and essentially it's the Gnostic or atheist versus the agnostic atheist. So a Gnostic atheist is one who's making a knowledge claim about whether there's God or not, or the agnostic atheist who is not making a knowledge claim but makes a belief claim.
This is why I think that it's useful to have labels, but I think that it is futile to go too far with those labels, because you can pick a label and then you really need to get to know the person. The label is a shortcut to have a general understanding, but then you really need the detailed understanding.
You need a working model.
Christian, I want to ask you, can you give us a brief comment, and then I'm going to hand this back over to Dr. Jones for the night. Christian?
Oh, yes, sorry. It just cut out briefly. Okay, my apologies. I just wanted to comment, if I may read a quotation from a book called Principles of Christian Theology, just about this dichotomy between theism and atheism. It says, actually, no amount of empirical generalization could ever conclusively establish either the theistic, in parentheses, providential, or the atheistic, in parentheses, tychastic view of the world. The evidence is too conflicting. Belief in providence, as we have seen, is existentially rooted in the experiences of God's acting in specific individual or communal histories in miracle and revelatory act, and from such experiences grows the wider belief in the divine government and natural process and the tendency for good, in parentheses, what is, to overcome evil, what is not, in parentheses. So, you mentioned just briefly, Joey, that labels are shortcuts. I completely agree with you. And labels don't encompass a person whatsoever. They just are a method of entry into conversation. And usually the labels can get mixed up in themselves.
Brian is a possible exception. But go ahead.
I just wanted to bring that in.
From a cognitive standpoint, I can say that nobody can live without labels. We all function with labels, even when we think we aren't. But the problem is when we sit in them and are not willing to be surprised by the fact that everything will be something other than what we've labeled it.
Very good. Guys, I'm going to turn this back over to Dr. Jones. Let me just state, in case it's not obvious, that it's been a joy having every one of you guys in this conversation, and we hope to have you back next week. And in case you haven't noticed, I only tease the people that I love. So, Dr. Jones, let me hand this back over to you.
I'd like to thank everyone for their words. It's wonderful to have a show, believe it or not, where you do very little talking and a lot of listening. And I think this is what we need to learn how to do. We need to learn how to share our thoughts and listen. And I think the Google Hangout is working well. I think that you guys are demonstrating the ability to be very respectful towards each other and others. And so I compliment you highly. I want to say one thing just before we close, and it's about Nelson Rose. This week, he has had quite a few people who have, in a sense, rejected him simply because he's come out with his position. And sometimes when you have friends who walk away from you or start rejecting you, it's painful. And so I want to give Nelson Rose just an opportunity to say a few words, because I think that we owe it to him. That is, to applaud him for being so honest and claiming, hey, this is where I am currently. I'm a pantheist. And I applaud you actually for, being very, very honest, because I know that you've been searching, and this is very meaningful to us all, because, the cult of honesty is not about trying to convert each other. It's about learning where we are on our journey and trying to find out what means something right now to us, and it may change in 5 to 10 years. And so would you say a few words just before we close the show?
I appreciate that, your sentiment. Bob, you've been very helpful as well. I've had a blog for about 2.5 years, and I've been sharing my search, my studies for quite a while. And I kind of went silent for the past 2 months because I really got into a state where I was not necessarily sure I should open up about where I was. And, it doesn't come from an uneducated standpoint. I've studied extensively, and I guess it got to the point to where too much theodicy kind of won over. And I made a decision, on what I did. But what surprised me more than anything was there were people that I thought I always had their unwavering support who just abandoned me. Outright said, "You're crazy. You deceived us by luring us in with your knowledge and exegetical position on Scripture." Because I haven't tossed that baby out with the bathwater. And, it's kind of hurtful, some of the things that were said. I'm used to some of the anti-Semitic remarks that happened because of my more Jewish stance on things. But, when people come right out and tell you that, you've deceived them, you've misled them, and that I'm wrong in thinking the way that I think, that was hurtful. But at the same time, and ironically enough, is that there were some people who I never thought would be supportive, would come out and say, "Hey man, good on you, keep it going." But naturally, these are the unconventional folks, the Bobs, the William Langles, the Michael Joneses, those folks, the Greg Brays, where they're like, it's okay to think differently and to get out of this crazy box. But it has been a tough couple of days. I wasn't expecting it to be as bad as it's been. But, it's okay. I'm a big boy. I've seen a lot worse, and I'll get through it. But I do appreciate the support that you guys at NCG have given me for sure, and I'm grateful for it. And if anything I can do to repay you, feel free to reach out. But I'm not going to change.
On our website.
Do pantheists pay tithes?
Yeah. It's charity.
That's fantastic.
Very good.
Hey, we certainly do love you, Nelson, very
I
much.
appreciate it.
And sometimes what we do in ending this show, I will ask Greg Bray, he's an atheist, to close out in prayer. So tonight, with someone who I really do respect, and I've only seen him a few times on this show, and that would be Brian. Would you close out in prayer, please?
Okay.
You can do it.
Just whatever you think.
Whatever you want to.
How does an atheist pray?
I don't.
Sure you do.
But no, I really don't. I haven't in many, many years. But I will just say that I hope that one of the things that's always very important to me is rational thinking and reason and respectful discourse and stuff, and for this kind of opportunity this evening to engage in all of that, I'm very appreciative of that, and so I will say that.
That's a great prayer.
That's a beautiful prayer.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you so much, Brian. Normally, Greg, he prays to the science thing, and it's funny. I mean, it's hilarious. Hey, thanks for being on the show, and this is the Cult of Honesty. I think we're all heretics here.
Can I just say one comment, and that is that I think that Nelson has proven many theists right that if you want to continue to believe in the God of the Bible, do not get an education.
That's good.
This is true.
That's good.
Education is bad.
Yeah.
Let your books collect dust.
The devil.
I say the same thing. So
Very good. And with that, I just want to say good night to everybody. Good night to our audience, and good night to you, Dr. Jones. Good night to our hangouts, and we will see you Sunday from 10 to 10.
I thought you were going to let me close out my show.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right.
He loves to do this. He
All right.
loves to have the final
All right,
word.
I'm gonna turn it back
Have you
over.
ever met a final word person? They have to have the final word.
Please don't
That's
embarrass
Joey.
me in front of my new
Go
friends.
Go for it,
Sweet.
Joey.
Please don't embarrass me in front of my new friends.
Okay, goodbye.
good night.
That
Bye.